of land we're passing now is known as Eagle Point. If you were to look at a map of Webster Lake, you might notice that this outcrop of land is shaped rather like an eagle's head. For many years, at the back of the cove, behind Eagle Point, there was an outdoor amphitheater. The church camp used to host an internationally known choir school here, and once each summer, the Dixie would drop anchor in the cove while the choir performed their annual production of the musical Showboat. The program featured all the great songs from this Jerome Kern Oscar Hammerstein musical, including Old Man River, We Could Make Believe, Bill, and Can't Help Lovin' That Man of Mine. The annual event was world famous. Singers, dancers, and musicians from overseas would come here to perform from the Dixie. But the last production of the musical was staged in 1964, and the amphitheater was removed in 2010 to make room for new housing for Epworth campers. The island we're coming up on now is called Tree Island, and if you look closely at the island, you'll see why. Legend has it that the fellow who built the house on the island always wanted a tree house, but he was afraid of heights. Well, he finally found a solution to his problem. If you look closely, you'll see a tree growing right through the roof of the house. You could say it's a tree house on the ground.
You might.
The smaller islands we're passing now were once called Breeks Island, but eventually came to be called the Dixie Islands. That's where the first Dixie captain used to live. His name was Captain Joe Breek, and he was a blacksmith by trade, but served as a professional riverboat captain on the Ohio River. He moved to North Webster in 1910, and the first boat he built on the lake, a small 18-foot stern wheel paddle boat, was called the City of Webster. It was steam-powered, carried mail and lumber as well as passengers, and it even had a small grocery store and, believe it or not, a blacksmith shop on board, where Captain Breek could do iron work for the farmers who lived around the lake then. The City of Webster lasted only 4 years, so in 1914, Captain Breek built the first Dixie. The first Dixie looked pretty much like the one you're riding on now, except it was a little smaller, had a wooden hull, and it was also steam-powered. Each winter, or near the end of fall, Captain Breek would pull the boat up on the smaller island here closer to us to protect the hull from the ice.
Thank you.
Back then, this little island was much larger. Time and erosion have taken their toll.
$1, please.
The original Dixie only lasted 14 years before her wooden hull became dangerous. So in 1929, Captain Breek had this boat built. For years, the Dixie would be docked by the island every evening after a day's work, so folks started calling this area the Dixie Islands.
One side should be all you want.
Okay, sorry that's taken so long. What would you like, sir? One popcorn or what? Oh, one popcorn, okay.
We're now entering Echo Bay as we pass the second deepest part of the lake. The water near the entrance to Echo Bay is about 45 feet deep. The large buildings on the hill are Echo Bay condominiums, the only condos on Webster Lake. They were built here in 1979 on reclaimed marshland. Before the late 1660s, the inhabitants of this area were Native Americans from the Miami and Potawatomi tribes. Early records place the first white men in the area around 1670. They were French trappers and fur traders who came for the plentiful mink, raccoon, beaver, and muskrat. The first white settlers did not come until much later, around 1820. In 1832, a treaty was signed with the Miami, ceding the lands of what would become Kosciuszko County, Indiana, to the United States government, and settlement of the area began in earnest. Up until settlers came to the area, there were two principal lakes and several ponds in this area, one being what is now Echo Bay. Historians insist there was once a stretch of land across what is now the mouth of Echo Bay. Folks can actually walk from Epworth Forest over to Miller's Landing. When the settlers built a dam and a grist mill on the small river called the Tippecanoe, the waters rose and the lakes joined, forming this one large lake. The wooded area to the north of Echo Bay is what's called the wetlands, a natural preservation area and home to a great deal of native wildlife. In fact, don't be surprised if you see a beaver swimming along here. There's a sizable beaver dam in the wetlands area. There's also a huge population of swans that live in the wetlands. Webster Lake is a great lake for fishing, especially for muskie. In fact, the lake is considered one of the best lakes in the nation when it comes to muskie fishing. It's not unusual to see 4-foot muskie here. Webster Lake is also home to bluegill, huge carp, crappie, and bigmouth bass. But they say that most of the big mouths are inside the boats. We're now passing Weimer's Landing. It's a sleepy little spot now, but believe me, there was a lot going on here in days gone by. Weimer's grocery store used to be located right where the channel is today. The Weimers also had cottages here that they rented out. It's known that the famous gangster John Dillinger used to spend time at those cottages. He felt it was a good place to hide out. Behind the grocery store was a small ice house that did a good business in the years before refrigeration. The ice was cut out of the lake in the winter, stored in the ice house, and sold to customers all summer long. The Dixie would also deliver ice around the lake. Legend also has it that the Weimers had a barn in back of the store where barn dances were held each Saturday through the season. In fact, if you listen closely, you might still hear the echoes of the square dance calling.
Walk all around the left-hand lady. Seesaw up her little toe and turn to the corner. Alabama with your left hand, park your right and right and left grand. Go right and left her down the ring and you meet your own in the promenade. Promenade around the square and all the way around.
We're now approaching Miller's Landing, also once the site of a grocery store. This also used to be a Dixie stop, and was actually the last stop for the Dixie every evening. Captain Breek would usually go ashore here to have a chat and a beer with the store owner before he went home to Dixie Island. The beer was kept in an icebox outside the store, where they also kept live turtles and bluegill. Back in the 1940s, a cottage here at Miller's Landing would cost around $200. Today, it's probably closer to $300,000. Just over the hill we're now passing is Sox Marina. That's Webster Lake's oldest marina. Folks who lived here in years gone by used to use the Dixie as a kind of water taxi. They'd board the boat for a ride to town. After shopping or business in North Webster, they'd hop back aboard for the trip back home. The area we're entering now is called Stumpy Flats. There's a lot of old tree stumps here and some very shallow water. Some places out there in the area marked by the buoys are no more than about 3 feet deep. The Dixie wasn't able to go through here until 1962. They had lowered the water level that year to do some repairs on the dam on the south side of the lake. So the Dixie's captain back then, a fellow named Tag Huffman, took advantage of the lower water line to cut a path through the stumps using a specially equipped pontoon boat with a platform on the bow. Tag would maneuver the boat while his brother would lay on the platform with a chainsaw and cut down the stumps, making a pathway to the Dixie's route. People in the area soon discovered that the old stump wood produced a beautiful blue flame when burned in a fireplace, and the wood was snatched up rather quickly. We'd like to remind you to drop by our concession desk on the lower deck, where you can purchase soft drinks, our world-famous Dixie popcorn, candy, and souvenirs, including photos of the boat, postcards, t-shirts, and more. You'll also find a restroom on the lower deck.